Ooh, that looks tasty. Welcome folks, today the Hungry Gamer is back with another crowdfunding preview, and today we're talking about Grifoni, Blades for Hire from Ludus Magnus Studios. And what this game is this is a worker placement slash storytelling game in which you are taking on one of the companies inside this larger band of mercenaries called Grifoni and traveling around Italy, the Italian countryside, I guess, and trying to accomplish various broad missions. And as you do that, you're going to have the power to kind of choose how the company reacts to the world at large and kind of how the quest goes. And to do that, you'll be using your 3 workers to place them out onto these worker placement spots, gathering resources which will allow you to hire new mercenaries, get new weapons, and then those mercenaries and weapons will allow you to do these various quests, all in a goal to advance these story beats over here. Now, if you are not interested in how this game is played and want to jump into my final thoughts, then you want to go to the timestamp on the screen right now. For those of us still here, let's talk about how this game is played. And thank you to Ludus Magnus for sending me this prototype so I can make this video. What you see here is mostly the setup of the game that I played last night, kind of the finishing setup, and it will work for the explanation of what is going on. I'll also point out that each player has one of these carts here, and I will make space for that a little bit later on. Each time you play, you'll pick one of these stories. In this case, Assault on the Castle. And the game's going to come with 3 or 4 of these stories. The prototype only came with this one. And so what will happen is you'll start out the game, and you'll flip it open, and you will have your story that you'll read, and you will have these 3 plot choice options. And I'll explain when you're able to do this later, but throughout the turns, players will have potentially the opportunity to make one of these plot choices, which will determine how you advance into the story. Do you do it with supremacy? Do you do it with valor? Or do you just kind of let life go as it goes and you get the bottom one here? And the only thing I want to point out right now is, in addition to the story and the rewards, there are these numbers here. These represent a resource that you have to have in order to come and make a choice over here. I will talk about this again later, but just remember that for now. Then once you've done that, each player will get to place out their squires, and their squires are their workers. And as you can see, I have my 3 right here. There would be another player putting theirs out, but for this moment, it doesn't particularly matter. It's simple worker placement, but you'll be placing it over here on the sides of these different columns in all of these different tents. And as you place them, you'll place them above one of the columns of actions there. And we're a little bit far away. I'll zoom in just a little bit as I can. But as you're doing it, what matters is, depending on wherever it is you go, you will pick an action that is down below. Unless you are at one of these spaces, like this one right here, that has this little connection between the two, which means you can do the top one and the bottom one. Or if we're at something like right here, you'll notice you get this resource and this resource. Then next over, you get this resource or this resource. It is simple worker placement. Now, the bulk of these are going to be getting your resources. You get potions and relics over here. You get bread and coin over here, you get wood and ore over here, while the others do other various things. Over on these right here, that's how you hire the mercenaries. I'll talk about that in just a moment. Over here, that's how you buy your weapons. Again, I'll talk about that in a moment. This space over here is how you're able to adjust the story, make that plot choice that I mentioned about. So if you happen to go over here, you could use the plot choice, or down here it means at the end of the round, you can take this worker and put it on any empty space that is available. And I say at the end of the turn because the way it works is, once you are activating all of your workers, you actually do this tent first, then this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. So in other words, if I wanted to hire a mercenary from over here, and all mercenaries cost bread and coin, but I did not have the bread and coin, I couldn't just say go here and say, okay, I have it now, I can hire. I would have to say, go over here, get my bread and coin here, and then come back over at the end of the round and potentially hire someone. And this deck here actually should have top card face up like so. Now, as I mentioned, you're going to be getting both mercenaries and weapons. And you'll see the cost of them are right here, and the mercenaries simply go over to your player board to the side of it, and it's a mercenary that you can use. Important things to note are all the mercenaries, or almost all the mercenaries, have some kind of special ability that you'll be building up, and they'll have a power, which is the fire symbol, and a distance they can go, which is the wheel. And I'll talk a little bit more about those in just a moment. And your weapons will also give you a bonus to your power and the distance you can move, but they also will have a tile. And you'll have to put that into your wagon. If you can't fit it in your wagon, you can't have it. And again, I will show you this in just a moment. The other thing I wanted to show you, though, is at the bottom of the mercenary, it tells you what kinds of weapons they can use. In this case, if I hire this mercenary, they could not use this piece of armor. Rather, I would have to give them something else. Like perhaps I had this already. And again, it also comes with something there. And they would be able to use the Tome of the Wise if I wanted to use it. And why you need to equip people, I will explain in just a moment. Then, after all players have done all of their actions, everything has been activated, then you move into the task phase. And what you see over here, and there's a fourth one right down here, as you can see, are each player will get to choose one of these tasks that they would like to do. There's also on the main board I just moved, there's always a task that anyone can do, and it costs absolutely nothing. You can just do it as long as you have someone to do it. And what you're going to do is you're going to place out your 3 chosen mercenaries, or up to 3 I should say, and you'll place them down below your board. So we'll say I'm going to send Lorenzo, and I'll send Fabio, and I will send Iman right here. I'm going to send those 3, and these other 3 I'm just going to keep in my company. Then each one can be assigned one weapon. And as I said, the weapons that you can use are based on the different mercenary. But in this case, we'll give Iman this little piece of armor right here, and we'll give Fabio the book, and we will give Lorenzo the other holy relic. And now what I've done is I have created a power level for my company. In this case, I have 3 plus 1, 4, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I have 12 strength, which is actually bad for my example based on what I have set out right now. So I'm just going to do a quick little change. I'm going to take Iman out of there. I'm going to change these weapons, and I'll put Vieri in there, like so. And then I will just give the book there. So now, as you can see, I have 5, 10, 14 strength, and I have 1 distance, 1 wheel. However, if I look at my wagon, you can see there are these areas of 4 in the wagon that also have a wheel. So I actually have 1, 2, 3 distance. If I had any part of this covered, I would not be able to use that. So I can go 3 distance, and then I'm going to look at these boards here, and you see how far you have to travel to accomplish one of those quests. In this case, 1, 2, or 3, and the other one right down there is 4. So I couldn't go to the 4, but I could go to either of the others. And the strength I need for these quests happen to all be 13, which we've established that I have. So then I would take the quest, I would read the story at the top, and then I would make a choice. And for this one, we'll just say for the family tomb, I decide to purify the crypt in the ruins. And my reward would be 3 valor. And I would mark that up right here. And there's always 3 choices. They always give you different things. And then we would flip this over, and the next player would get to make their choice, go wherever it is that they would like to go. And then that's the end of a turn. However, as you recall, I mentioned that it's possible to send someone over here to accomplish one of these plot goals. And so assuming I had already had at least 3 here, or 3 here, we'll say I had the 3 blue, then I would have the ability to, after all of this is done, make the plot choice, which would mean this reward would happen. We would take one of these tokens right here and say we made the blue choice on the first act, and then I would go to chapter 2, in this case, right here, and new story event and new choices to be made. Now there is one more thing to talk about this. There's this balance of power right down here, and this is the company as a whole's valor and supremacy. And several of the worker placement spots allow you to adjust these up or down. And so what these mean are, they count towards this total that you need. So if the blue marker was all the way up here, and I was trying to get to a 3 in order to come over here, I would actually only need 1 on my personal player board. However, as you see, the red is all the way down at -2, so if I wanted to make this choice here, I would actually have to have 5 on my personal player board. Now, this is important because there's some in-game scoring that I haven't talked about yet that goes along with this, but it does actually allow players, when they see you go over here, they can try to adjust these numbers to make it so that you can or can't accomplish whatever you're trying to do over here. And that's important because if you ever can't do an action, you just lose that action. So you have to be very clear on what it is that you're trying to do. Now we're closing on the end of the rules overview here. It's important to note that after every 3 turns, if a choice is not made, this choice at the bottom will be made. However, if, say, we were on turn 2, and I came over here and I chose this one right here, this would advance, as I said, to chapter 2, like so, and then this would skip all the way over here to round 4, because now we're in the next act of our story. So, in theory, the entire game could be completed in just 3 turns. Highly unlikely, but in theory it is possible, because every time a plot choice is made, you advance to the next act, place out a token here, and then again advance to the next one, and at the end of the game would place out another token depending on what choices have been made. And after a plot choice is made here at the end, then you go into the epilogue book. It'll tell you what happens in your story and give some in-game scoring specific to the choice that you made. And that's the broad overview of how this game works. So what do I like about this game? Well, before I jump into that, let me just say that this is a game that I backed, not sight unseen, because I looked at all the campaign page and everything. This is a game that I backed, and I really was intrigued by it. I was very excited by it, and so I reached out on the Kickstarter to Ludus Magnus and said, hey, this is who I am. I'm kind of a mediocre deal. Can I please cover this? And they said, sure. They sent it on out. So that's how I have this. But to be clear, I'm not getting anything for this video other than I got to play it early. Because as I said, I am a backer of the campaign. And so the first thing I like about it is the promise of the production and the art. I like the art on this. It's kind of a gritty, cartoony, but not Warhammer grimdark. It's just, I don't know, it's dirty, and it's kind of cool. I dig that. I like that. I like the way it looks. And the 3D boards, it looks great when you have it out there. You could not see that from my top down, particularly from the angle that I was, because I had to turn it sideways so you could see everything. But as you can see, it does look pretty darn cool. The deluxe components are great. All of that, I really, really like the way that it looks. And as I mentioned, the 3D boards, very, very cool. Don't know they're necessary, but they're cool. Next thing I'll say is, I like the story choices. I like that we do have a little bit of a story that we're kind of playing through. It's not a lot. This is not Shakespeare. This is just little bits of story that are kind of interesting, with some interesting turns depending on what story result that you get. Because there's basically 16 or 20 different variables that you could take all the way through this story, because that's how many different epilogues that there are. So it's interesting the way that that works. I also like that you can feasibly advance the game very quickly if you make those plot choices rapidly. And something that I completely forgot to mention in my rules overview is every player also starts the beginning of the game with 2 in-game scoring conditions. One, you get bonus points for each of the different acts that ends with the choice that you want. So the last time I played, I really wanted the first choice to be that nothing choice at the bottom. I really wanted the second choice to be the red supremacy choice, and I really wanted the third choice to be the blue choice. And if all 3 of those were achieved, I got 12 points. You got 4 points for each, and you also get bonus points for drafting the right type of mercenary combinations, the right type of weapon combinations. But as I was saying, I like this variable length. I like that you can push that game. I can say, you know what? I'm worried the other players are going to knock out my ability to get the red choice for this act, which is what I need for my in-game scoring goal. So I'm going to, on turn 2 of the act, I'm going to push the end right now. And I really like how that is something that is out there that can change up the game length and keep you on your toes, because you can't necessarily just say, okay, I'll do it later, because legitimately, you might not be able to do it later, especially because you lose all of your personal band supremacy and valor, your red and your blue. It resets every single act. Anyhow, I really, really find that intriguing and exciting and fun. Next thing I'll say is there is a very tight market. And it's tight for two different reasons. One, it's tight because you're constantly spending what you get, but also you're limited by your cart, because every single thing that you get goes into that cart. And if you can't Tetris it, something gets thrown away. And also putting stuff into your cart is going to slow you down. Thematically, your wagon is heavier, it's hard to get further and do things. So really, really clever the way that tight market works. Now this is a little bit at odds with my usual thoughts. I don't always like really tight markets because it just can be exhausting. Because you find you're like, oh my gosh, I'm one bread short, I can't do anything. But this game has a pretty rapid influx of stuff that you're getting. It's easy to get things out on the board. You're always able to do something. If nothing else, you just send a single guy out there that's with a crappy weapon, and you can get a bunch of resources from the always available quests. So it's pretty easy to get stuff and get moving on, and that's really, really cool the way that that works. Also, in addition to that, you're able to, and I didn't highlight this, but when you complete a quest, you take that card and you can go to a space and throw it away. Throw it away and get a bunch of resources. So it's easy to get resources even though the market is quite tight. Last thing I want to highlight is I love the tableau building of hiring the different people. This reminds me of one of my favorite games of all time, Guildmaster. And Chris Anthony, if you're watching this, hello. But it reminds me of that in the sense that you're getting these characters that have these fun powers. And man, those powers are great. Like you can just lock into a certain power and then you are building your entire strategy around these powers that you get. Really, really clever. And I really, really enjoy the way that works. And also, as I mentioned, I love the different character that all of the mercenaries have. So that brings me to what are my quibbles with the game. The first thing is, and now this is something that I'm not anticipating being a problem, but there were a bunch of things that I found ambiguous in the rules. Again, prototype rules. I'm sure they're going to be fixed. And I'm so sorry to poor Emiliano, who I sent so many questions to, trying to make sure I got things right. Because I just wasn't sure about sometimes how the quests refresh. I wasn't quite sure how the balance tracker worked, a few things. And so I bring this up not because I'm worried about the rulebook not being clear, but rather there are some things in the game that are a little more complex than they are at first glance. When I read the rules in advance of getting this prototype, I was like, oh, this is super simple and easy. But once I got at the table, I was like, oh, wait, how does that actually work? Wait, when does this actually happen? So there are a few things in what is a pretty light, simple game that are going to jump out at you and be like, whoa, how does this work? And so just be aware of that. It's not as simple of a game to learn as you think it is. The next thing I'll say is, and this is related to the rules, is making the plot choice is fiddly. It's the one thing in this game that is just complicated. And what I mean by that is you have to take your worker and put your worker onto the story space. Great, no problem. However, when it comes time to activate, if you do not have the required amount of red or blue on your personal player board, plus or minus the number that is on the tabula, which is where the storybook is, you cannot go to make a plot choice. Now, even if you do have enough to make the plot choice and you go there first, there are still players that can act after you that can adjust that balance, and suddenly you are no longer able to afford that plot choice. However, you're still going to get to go on a quest, which may then change that number again on your personal player board to where now you are able to make that plot choice. Now, once you get it, you got it. But it's just nothing else in the game is a weird if-then three-step process like this one is. And I find it very satisfying, and I understand why it's difficult, because that is the big moment in the game. You are pushing the end game, you are skipping an act, and everybody else is going to lose all their resources that they built up as far as the red and blue, the supremacy valor. So it makes sense, but it is a thing that the first time you play, it's confusing. The next thing I'll say is, I can imagine for some the tightness of The market versus your cart can be frustrating because there are times when you want to get a bunch of weapons. You need weapons to get some of your in-game scoring conditions, but by getting all these weapons and getting new weapons, you're loading down your cart and then suddenly you don't have space for the resources. Again, as I said, it's a very tight market and I find it actually pretty darn satisfying. It means get it, spend it, get it, spend it, get it, spend it. But if you're someone that likes to plan everything out and get a whole bunch of stuff, you're going to find that you are stymied with the tight market. So either you're going to love it or it's going to bother you. The next thing I'll say is some of the quests when you're playing at 2-player, they don't quite cycle as much as you'd like because by the end of the game, you need to get down to the challenging quests lower in those stacks. And if you're still stuck at kind of the top of an area that's only the 1 or 2 dot cards, then it's going to be hard to get that end game. And the last thing I'll say is, I think it is challenging to get those plot choices made early. And part of what is exciting about the plot choice is you can suddenly on turn 1 or 2 of an act, boom, skip ahead. But it's real hard to do that on turns 1 and 2 usually. Now that might just be the people I've played with, and when we've played, we're not really hitting that balance where you're moving the balance up and down, which is probably something that we should be doing. But it doesn't happen as easily as you think. In particular, that's happening because you lose all your supremacy and valor at the beginning of each new act. So it's not as easy to make those choices as you think it might be. Again, that makes sense story-wise because you're concluding an act of the whole story, so it should be challenging, but just something to keep in mind. I don't know that it's a negative thing, but just something to keep in mind. And the last 2 things I'll say is each of the factions, the colors, has a different bit of art and a different cart you get and a different starter character and item. But I just wish there was a little bit of flavor that goes with those characters you start with. They do nothing. They're 0 zeros. Their weapons are 0 zeros. It's literally you have them, so if nothing else, you can go out there and do the 0 missions. And the only other thing that I'll say, and this is probably my only big quibble, is the box says 60 minutes. This is not a 60-minute game. No. Now, I bet if you were skipping acts after every 2 turns, it might be a 60-minute game. But this is a 90 to 2 hour game once I think you know what's going on. Now, I may find that I am wrong with this as I play more of it. If I get a chance to try the solo mode, and I will, if I get a chance to try the solo mode, make a follow-up video to talk about it. If a draft of the solo mode is made available to me, I'll talk about it. So as I said, that may change when we start thinking about solo mode and really getting good at the game and things like that. But I do not think this is a 60-minute game. But there you have it, folks. That is Grifoni, Blades for Hire. I am pleased with my pledge. I am happy that I pledged for what I did. I'm excited to learn about what these expansions are because of course I got the deluxe because of course I did, which means I get all these 3 expansions. And I mentioned Shakespeare earlier, and I said that because there's a Shakespeare expansion, and I'm excited to get Oberon into the game. I don't know what's going to happen exactly, but all these things, so I'm excited by it. I think it is an exciting game. It does some very, very cool things with tableau, again, a la Guildmaster, which I already love. And I just think that it is a unique game in the sense of the story thing. I've never heard of it before, and I've played through several times now and had different story choices all the way through. I'm excited for more stories. So I think this is a game that's unlike most things that you've probably played. It looks fantastic. It's all supposedly going to fit in one box, which is very exciting to me. And all in all, I like it. I'm happy with it. I'm going to keep playing it until they ask me to send the prototype on. Just very, very clever. Very pleased with it. And so I'm babbling now. But if you're somebody that likes worker placement, likes tableau building, and is intrigued by this story thing, this idea that we're going to change scoring conditions for the end of the game as we're going through. We're going to tell this story together as we're going through this. Story bits are fun, they're silly, you're making choices on the tasks, sometimes just based on the story, sometimes based on the rewards. Really clever stuff. If that is interesting to you, then I think this is a must back. I really enjoyed it. I am super chuffed, as Mark Dainty would say, by this. And yeah, I think if you are into tableau building and you are into worker placement and the tight economy of having to spend stuff rapidly or you're going to hurt yourself doesn't bother you, then I think this is one that you will really enjoy. So there you have it, folks. As always, if you found this video useful, please like, subscribe, share, maybe become a channel member. As always, thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.